Good evening from EPCOT. So I'm here for a super quick visit. It is officially flower and garden season. That's not the point of today's visit. I am going to probably be looking at getting some merch, even though I already have a bit of Orange Bird stuff already. But I am here to kind of quickly show what it's like to be at the theme parks right now. So Amanda and I have been able to go a little bit off and on since the parks reopened. And of course we do our best to stay safe. Nobody in our family has gotten sick, luckily, but a lot of people are trying to think about visiting and traveling again. So we want to take the time to kind of point out what we do to be smart and be safe while we come out to the theme parks, and kind of also highlight what Disney's done to keep people safe. So I'm going to do a quick little loop around the park. It is actually spring break, so you would think right now it's super crowded, but one of the first things we do is time when we come really well. So I'm here at 9:30 at night. It actually closed at 11 today, but because it's so late, there's like very few people here. So of course the entrance just got redone with the flags and the lights. I got the fountain behind me, and there's very few people here right now. And the people that are here are all heading towards the exit. So we'll have low crowds, which is great, and also kind of highlight some of the other stuff that we do to, you know, be smart and be safe while we're out at the theme parks. Before we head into Mouse Gear, which is going to be my first stop, I again wanted to show they have the new music loop playing out here in the entrance. They have the flags up for the original pavilions. Of course the fountain, but then the light strip that goes around the entire entrance now, and of course Spaceship Earth. But we're gonna head over to Mouse Gear. Now, as you can see, parks aren't too bad, so we are always very mindful of our distancing while we're walking around the park, which the nice thing is all the theme parks are very nice and open, so it's not usually too hard to keep your distance from other groups. You know, of course, there are always going to be ups and downs in the crowd, so you may, you know, walk by a little group or so, but in general we always try to stay towards the edge of the paths. Usually not too hard to do that, and keep your distance from other parties. So over there is the walkway that takes you back towards Mouse Gear, but you can also come up here by the guest services and loop your way around. So we always try to take, you know, the quieter walkways, which the nice thing about being local, which we might have a slight advantage over people that are on vacation, because, you know, you're kind of here for the full day, so you kind of have to be here during the crowded parts of the day, but we always try to come later in the evenings and nighttime when the crowds are low. And of course we're here all the time, so we know the walkways that are going to be quieter and how to avoid the crowds, like coming over here by guest relations. So we've almost made it over to Mouse Gear, and I did want to point out that all the stores are one-way entrances and one-way exits. So they do keep a count of how many people are currently in those stores, so that, you know, they're at a limited capacity, and if the store's full, they have a distance queue set up. I've waited in that queue before with Amanda. It's pretty rare because Mouse Gear usually has you know, enough room for a decent bit of people, and there's not always a large quantity of people rushing into Mouse Gear at the same time, but they can definitely set up a queue on busier days. Right now it's late enough where there's no line at all, but you can see these markers on the ground here. Always easy to indicate where you need to stand, 6 feet from the group in front of you. And then what we like to do is, if there's a large group in front of us that kind of takes up the majority of that space between the two markers, we'll usually stand 2 markers back, just so we have at least 6 feet from that group in front of us to provide ample space so that we're not too close to anyone in front of us or behind us. Now I'm over here outside of the Mouse Gear construction site, so they're working on the new store in there. But I do want to show that all the parks have a lot of outdoor seating now, so they try to keep everyone outdoors as much as possible, as well as distance as much as possible. So for Flower and Garden, they have this outdoor escapes area, so there's all kinds of nice, like, patio type furniture that you can sit at. Of course they have the benches, and you can see everything's been distanced and kind of reconfigured, so there's picnic benches in the far background for you to eat at if you get food from some of the booths. And then of course, like we've seen in the past for all the food festivals, they always have these black temporary tables all around the park. But you can also see there's little markers on the ground, and that tells the cast members exactly where those tables need to lie, so that they are 6 feet apart, so that if people are eating there and they're allowed to take their mask off, because you can only remove your mask for actively eating and drinking while stationary. So you can't, like, drink from a water bottle while you're walking around. You have to step to the side of the walkway out of the way of other guests, and you can stop at one of these tables that are all distanced so that you can eat your food or drink your drinks that you can get from the food booths that are throughout the park for the festival. Now, something that's important to keep in mind is going to be rides. Now, when me and Amanda come to the parks, we don't ride much in general, and that's luckily another perk of being local. We don't really miss out too much, since, you know, we can pretty much ride stuff whenever we want. So we really do avoid waiting in standby lines right now, just because it's not something that we're personally comfortable doing. But of course, if you're coming on a vacation, you're going to be waiting in lines, and of course the lines are distanced. So something that is definitely important to remember is that they're going to look much longer than they really are. So we're passing by Norway right now, And the line for Frozen Ever After typically can reach into China and kind of weave around China. And that's because they try to keep the bulk of the line outside. So like the line right now is actually ending kind of right in front of us at the corner between Norway and China. And that's again because they have to keep the parties 6 feet apart. That makes the line take up much more room, even though it may not be physically a longer line. Now early on, the lines did move slower because of only allowing a certain number of parties per boat. But most of the rides, including Frozen Ever After, have plexiglass between the rows now so that they can seat every row. Now, it may not necessarily be the best view of the ride, unfortunately, but that's kind of what you have to do in this day and age to get more people on the ride so that you're not waiting forever in line. Another rule of thumb that's pretty common between all the parks, but you may not see it as much in EPCOT, but definitely for like Islands of Adventure or for SeaWorld, the back of the parks tend to be much quieter. You see a lot of people towards the front near the entrances. So now that we're in the World Showcase and we're back by Africa, definitely less people walking around over here. Made it past Africa and we're now walking through Germany. We are exactly 1 hour before closing and you can see just how empty it's become. Now it's not necessarily always going to be like this an hour before closing depending on when the park closes. During quieter times of the year it can close as early as like 7 p.m. So you'll definitely see people here until the very end. But because it is open until 11 today, definitely had a lot of people leave earlier in the day. Very, very quiet to walk around right now, which is why we do intentionally try to come at times of the day like this when we know we're not going to be surrounded by people. Now, one of the biggest changes about coming to the parks during the pandemic era is the park pass system. So I'm sure as everyone knows at this point, you do need to have a park reservation to enter a Disney park. SeaWorld requires them as well, Universal does not. They kind of work on a standby system. But you need to have your park pass, which you just book online, and they have a link to it through the MDE app. And if the park passes are gone for the day, then you can't come to that park. Now, if you do want to park hop and you have a park hopping ticket, you can do that. You just have to have your park pass for your first park. You must enter the park that you have the park pass for. And then once park hopping hours begin, which is typically 2 p.m., you can then switch to the other parks as long as they have availability, which I haven't heard of them ever being at capacity for park hopping guests, but it is very frequent where they are at capacity for park passes. So especially if you're looking at a busier time of the year or on a weekend, they do tend to run out of park passes, but they do have separate pools for hotel guests and pass holders and single day tickets. So if you are staying at a Disney resort, that does give you a bit of an advantage because you're not pulling from the same amount of park passes as the annual pass holders. And I did stop over here by Living with the Land, my favorite ride in EPCOT, because I did want to show what some of the queues look like. So if there is a queue that has a lot of switchbacks or lines where people are kind of crossing back and forth next to each other, Disney has installed plexiglass barriers, just like they've done on some ride vehicles, but they have them in the queues as well, so that they can utilize the full queue space and not have to use every other row, but you're not breathing right next to another group. So this is another thing to kind of be prepared for. I mean, I know some people have commented on it being a little more claustrophobic, but it is nice that it's open above and below you, but it does provide that personal space between you and the group next to you. So definitely something to prepare for. Not every ride has this. If you're in a single file queue or something that doesn't have a switchback like this, like something like the later half of the Pirates of the Caribbean queue, for example, or something like Haunted Mansion, you don't have a weaving line, so you're not going to have this plexiglass all around you, but some of the queues do have this. That is definitely something to be aware of. But if you come at a quiet time like now, and it's a 5-minute line, you walk directly onto the boat. You don't even go in that area at all. So you may not have to wait in a line like this if you time it right. That is going to be it for this very quick visit to EPCOT, but hopefully it was helpful overall. Now, one last thing I did want to comment on is if you're trying to plan a trip, and I know a lot of people have been wanting to wait to be vaccinated, I can say from experience that I've had 1 dose so far, so not fully vaccinated quite yet, but it definitely does help a little bit with your comfort level knowing that you have a level of protection. So if you're thinking about that, that definitely might be the best choice, but of course it's always going to depend on what you're comfortable with and what's best for your family. But something to keep in mind is that, of course, masks are still required at all the parks at all times, unless of course you are actively eating or drinking while stationary. They are required to stay on for photos, so if you're not a fan of wearing masks, I would definitely say to hold off for a while. They have said the masks are here to stay at least into 2022, so I wouldn't expect that to change anytime soon. And if you are vaccinated, still expect to have your mask on. There is no kind of, exception for being a vaccinated guest coming into the parks. You still have to follow all the same guidelines as everyone else. So if you're looking to come right now, the parks are here. There's still a great time, but of course things are a little different now. So hopefully this helps you make a more educated decision and know, what we do to stay safe, what makes us feel comfortable, and if that makes you feel comfortable to come to the parks right now. But thanks for watching. Definitely give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to see some other adventures that we go on in the near future. But again, thanks for watching, and we will see you guys the next time we go to Disney and beyond.